Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight, it's the episode you've all been waiting for. It's our Marvel villain/anti-hero special, as we are covering the strange journey of the Marvel TV witch Agatha Harkness in Agatha All Along, and then the gooey journey across America of Tom Hardy's Venom in Venom: The Last Dance. But before all of that morally ambiguous, complex stuff, Alistair, what else have you consumed?
Well, this is not content about a villain, but it is someone making bad decisions. So I feel it is a part of this episode very much. I've been watching Totally Completely Fine, which is an Australian comedy drama that on the UK is available through ITVX. It's a black comedy about a woman called Vivian, played by Thomasin McKenzie. Her grandfather dies and she inherits his house, which she's very pleased about. But then she discovers that his beachfront property is adjacent to a notorious suicide cliff where people go to, throw themselves off. And for the last 40 years or so, he's been keeping a sort of solitary watch over this suicide spot and coming out and gently talking down people and saving their lives. And now that he's died, she's inherited not just the house, but this mission as well. Unfortunately, Vivian is quite upset and depressed, unstable individual dealing with a lot of shit in her own lives. So yeah, she has to kind of deal with her own stuff and rise to the challenge of saving these lives. So yeah, it's a kind of black comedy. It's very sad though as well. There's a lot of stuff about depression and suicide and self-destructive behavior in it, the premise makes sense. Yeah, and also there's this sort of cast of like odd characters which kind of keeps it funny. There's her two brothers are bizarre people. There's their families. There's the sort of other people who live on the road, and there's a group of characters who join the cast. So basically, suicidal people that she talks down and then becomes friends with. So yeah, it's kind of got a sort of bittersweet thing, but it's kind of dark and it's kind of funny. And it's one of those sort of slightly odd shows that I can strongly recommend.
Yeah, that sounds like one of these quirky things that could either be great or could be a bit tonally weird and uncomfortable, and I'm glad they pulled it off. Her granddad really screwed her there, didn't he? Or was the idea that this would cause her to improve as a person? Was it a sort of attempt at a post-death intervention?
Yeah, I think that's very much what he was going for, basically, giving her some structure and mission in life by passing this on, and that it's what she needed to sort herself out.
So he's really betting a bunch of other people's lives on the fact that she would rise to this challenge.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yes, that she would get herself together and sort her out, yeah.
Fair enough, that is quite funny.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's also, because it taps into these sort of things where it's like, how well do you really know the people? And like, you assume your grandparents are just sort of sweet old people or whatever, and there's actually a different side to them and things like that. Yeah, and obviously she discovers more about her grandfather, she lives in his house and uncovers all this stuff. I don't want to say too much because of spoilers, but the other thing is like the plot does obviously revolve around moments when Vivian, due to her own, the way she fucks her life up, but again, partly due to past trauma in a sort of understandable way. There are moments in the show when she does fail to rise to this challenge, shall we say. It does go to some dark places. Yeah, in some levels, it kind of reminds me a little bit of 6 Feet Under, in that it's that sort of comedy about death and screwed up people trying to pull their lives together and overcome all like how messed up they are in the head. It's maybe not quite as kind of dark as 6 Feet Under could get, but it does have that kind of vibe, and I was a big fan of 6 Feet Under, so yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I watched 6 Feet Under a few years ago. It's a good show, although it does become a bit relentless if you cane it all in the same few months. This sort of endless cycle of them fucking up. Anyway.
Yeah.
Not reviewing 6 Feet Under. Yeah, no, cool. This does sound interesting. It's on ITVX, which is a bit of a turn-off, as that app is terrible, but it does sound like the sort of thing I'd probably enjoy.
Yeah, there's a gargantuan quantity of adverts inserted into it via ITVX. But again, this is unusual in that we don't usually cover much stuff on ITV, but now we've discussed Douglas is cancelled and this. So yeah, I guess they've got some good content on there. I suppose like this is made by an Australian channel that I'm not familiar with, so I think it's been bought in from Australia. It's starring Thomasin McKenzie, who's actually from New Zealand, but she does Australian very well. She really is the heart and soul of this show, in that, it's kind of about her. She makes the character sort of relatable, emotional. She does a really strong performance, conveys both your kind of sadness and the sort of self-destructive behaviour. Yeah, she makes this sort of, gives it a sort of a solid core in that you kind of feel very strongly for Vivian, and you kind of, through making her the main character, you get more of an insight into her past and the things that have happened to her that's led her down this sort of self-destructive and irresponsible path that she's taken. But also at the same time, you're very much like shouting kind of, no, don't do the stupid self-destructive thing. That's not going to end well. So yeah, she is very good, and enjoyed her in lots of things from the film Eileen, Jojo Rabbit. She's done lots of good stuff. This is, I guess kind of really setting out her stall as an actor in that. Just, main character of a TV show. There's a real wide range of like from bits that are really quite funny to bits that are quite sad to bits that are quite dark. So, it does really show her range and talent.
I guess it's interesting in a way, but she's done a few big, like, American movies, and I don't know, in some ways it seems an odd career trajectory to go back and do a TV show in Australia, but I don't know, maybe she wanted to be near her home, maybe they offered her some good money, maybe she just really felt the series, who knows.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great piece of writing, so the script would be a good one. Yeah, it's an interesting choice, but this has sort of, I guess, reached beyond Australia in that, I've seen it talked about on social media, obviously it's on TV here, it's been like covered in the news. Yeah, and she is really, great as sort of the main character in this. Although I must say that there is a whole supporting cast of bizarre characters who make it interesting and funny. Yeah, Brandon McKellen as her brother Hendrix, the sort of, uncool dad. He's quite a funny character. And also Rowan Witt as the older brother, who is a sort of control freak, extremely, uptight, unable to relax, gets very stressed easily. Again, there's a lot of comedy potential in that. There's a running joke that he's a sort of uptight square with this absolutely implausibly hot Spanish boyfriend, which is just quite a funny running joke. So yeah, it's a good cast. It's a good cast. Yeah, and each character kind of gets especially each of the family members gets a sort of full arc, and some of the other people that she saves. Yeah, so it is a kind of an ensemble thing that's making this work.
And is this something that's likely to come back, or is this complete in itself?
I don't know. I mean, they could certainly leave it at the point that it's at. I feel I was actually just Googling to find out if this is a miniseries or if it's something that's going to run and run. It doesn't say miniseries on IMDb, but it does also only have a date of 1 year, which means that it's either cancelled or it was just intended to be 6 episodes and that's all you get.
Yeah, no, I did glance at the Wikipedia and I can't see anything. But yeah, no, okay, fair enough. I guess that does at least make it a fairly quick self-contained thing to watch in itself. Oh, cool. I might actually check this out. Does it sound like the sort of slightly tonally clashing thing I like?
Yeah, it's one of those things when I can see comedy about suicide, ooh, it's we're going there. I mean, it could be in terrible poor taste. And it's not some kind of Family Guy-esque shocker, how disrespectful can we be, how offensive we can be. It is it's got heart to it and strong characterization, which I think makes it accessible. I mean, I guess I would caveat this: if you do find anything to do with suicide and death very, very distressing, this show probably will be a bit too emotionally intense for you. It is, I think, one of those things that it does pull off the tight thing of kind of silliness and comedy, but also heart and emotion and darkness and things like that. That's why I wanted to discuss it here, because I feel that our listeners with their eclectic tastes and slightly offbeat, odd pop culture will probably find this really good. My partner also really enjoyed it as well, so there's another recommendation there. She actually put me onto this after watching it herself.
Okay, so it's not too impossibly bleak then.
No, not too impossibly bleak, but it's good. And like I say, Thomasin McKenzie's great. It's really setting out a stall. One of the first times I've seen her doing a properly adult role. I guess she's in her early 20s, so usually gets cast as teens sometimes in things like Jojo Rabbit or Old and things like that. But yeah, this is obviously playing an adult character and with sort of adult themes, so definitely a calling card. So yeah, I recommend this. Encourage people to watch it. Anyway, I've been watching a comedy about suicide. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
I have been watching another series you could vaguely tie back to the Down Under New Zealand Australia region, but not really. This is Reservation Dogs, which is another sort of dark comedy series, this time on Disney Plus, I think Hulu in America. This is about a group of teenagers growing up on a Native American reservation in Oklahoma and dealing with, partly the struggles of living there at all, but also the recent death of a close friend of theirs and the lingering sadness around that. And as the show goes on, it also gets a little into the background of their families and everything they've been through in the past, and the fact that a lot of their parents also experienced a major loss of a close friend as teenagers as well, so there's a lot of mirroring there. It's partly about their sort of silly teenage antics, but also kind of with this vague undercurrent of sadness. It's good fun. It's much like Totally Completely Fine and Orange is the New Black and a lot of shows I've enjoyed. Both very fun and very sad in kind of equal measure. Although it does ultimately find its way to a quite uplifting place. It's a very human show. It's a very, just a very nice account of these people just trying to find some happiness in their lives. It's a good show. Enjoyed it a lot. And the vague Down Under connection I mentioned is that Taika Waititi is credited as a co-creator, although he doesn't write any of the episodes, so I don't know how intrinsic to the show he is, or if he was just helping shepherd it along and consulting a bit. But yeah, this is mainly show run by Sterling Hayao, who I haven't heard of before, but yeah, this is a great show, so probably someone to look out for.
Yeah, Taika Waititi, former New Zealander of the Year and creator of Jojo Rabbit that we just discussed. Yeah, I've wanted to watch this show for a long time. It's been on my to-watch list and always seems to get put to the post. So I'm glad to hear that it's good because, yeah, it is something that I thought looked really, really good. I was very excited for it. Then when it came out, it didn't seem to get a huge amount of buzz around it, which could have just been that it didn't, I don't know, connect with the zeitgeist at the time. Or sometimes when something's really hyped and then when it comes out, there's not much buzz, it can mean it's a disappointment. So I'm glad to hear that it sounds like it's the former, not the latter.
Partly it picks up a lot of momentum as it goes along. Partly it's just quite soft and quiet. So it's not really maybe the sort of thing that gets massive immediate buzz. I'm not sure.
But it does sound like an interesting, again, tonal mix.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to make an obvious, possibly slightly reductive comparison, I'd almost say it's a bit like Derry Girls, maybe, about these kids growing up in this specific place. I think it's a bit more towards the drama side of the comedy drama spectrum. I think Derry Girls was more of a sitcom with occasional sort of emotional or sad moments, whereas this is, I think, balancing it a bit more 50-50. It does have that in common, especially the way it sort of starts with the kids and as the show goes along sort of slowly gets into the background of like the adults as well, sort of generally becoming more of a sort of wider portrait of this community.
Yeah, that does sound a lot like Derry Girls, actually, yeah. Again, yeah, portrait of teenagers going through standard teenage things, but in a very specific place and time. So yeah, obviously set around that. Yeah, that does. I mean, these all sounds like very strong comparisons and things like that. I always wondered the fact that it's called Reservation Dogs. Is that a nod to Reservoir Dogs, the Tarantino film, or is it just a coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
I think it is a direct reference. It's sort of vaguely made in the first episode, but it's sort of what they call their little gang, Reservation Dogs or Les Dogs. Although they do hold off doing any direct references or jokes about Reservoir Dogs until the very, very, very end, I guess, for fear of being obvious.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, yeah. I mean, it's an obvious nod and things like that. But it's interesting, though. That's actually the first thing that caught my attention about the show. Now, I've heard good things, and yeah, it's definitely one of the ones to watch. It sounds like my sort of jam with the kind of mix of comedy and drama and things like that. Again, something that's, got a lot of plot and characterization.
Well, yeah, again, you've got these four kids who have these distinct personalities, and I don't know, there's maybe a couple who are sort of the protagonists who maybe get a bit more attention, and then you become slowly more, I don't know, invested in the others as the show goes along as well, as it sort of gets under their skin. It's a bit more prone to the character focus episode in true, I guess, drama style. There are quite a few episodes where you sort of take off with one character and a lot of the others don't really appear, which again helps you, I guess, get more into the nooks and crannies of the community and focus more on like the people these characters interact with, like their parents or their relatives and stuff.
Yeah, and it's an unusual setting as well. I can't think of another sitcom certainly, or that takes place on a reservation as well. It does seem like in that sense it's breaking new ground.
Yeah, and it does talk a bit about the culture in a very sort of demonstrative way, I guess. It doesn't really lecture you. It's not really a show about, I don't know, the history of Native Americans or anything, but it's something they're all clearly, aware of and live with. It's the sort of thing that comes up. There's a ridiculous episode, I think, in the third season, where Amber Midthunder of Prey and Legion fame turns up as this Native American influencer who just rambles on and on and on at them about how we all need to find our strength as natives, and talks about their struggles in a very broad, patronising way, which I guess is maybe designed to appeal to white people online, but all the people who actually live in this reservation find quite patronising and annoying.
That does sound like it's rife for satire, and I have enjoyed Amanda Midthunder in a lot of things. I mean, again, it sounds similar to Derry Girls, what you were saying, in that it's set in this environment that is on some level highly charged with politics and sort of political history, but the show kind of puts that in the background, keeps it there present, kind of shaping the world of these characters and informing it, but puts all that in the background to focus in on the characters, their story and the comedy moments.
Yeah, I mean, it has ended. The third season was the last one, and it has got an ending, but it's all quite low key. I mean, you just come away with this nice, vague, broad vibe. Spoilers, I guess. You come away with this broad feeling that everything's going to be okay. It doesn't, slam the lid on the whole thing.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. That does sound good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear this is good because I have really wanted to watch it for a while.
Yeah, it's just really nice, and it's only 3 8 to 10 episode seasons of about half an hour, so it's not going to break the bank time wise. No, I'd really recommend this. I think it finished in 2023, so I can't put it on my top 10 of the year. It just misses out there, but to be honest, if I'd watched it, it probably would have been on last year's top 10. This is incredibly good.
Yeah, similar to Ghosts, I guess. You said any show that's really good that you can binge like the whole thing in one go and really enjoy it is likely to make the top 10 list.
Yes, which is why For All Mankind will be on the list this year, even though it only aired 3 episodes at the very start of 2024.
Still eligible, and that's the crucial point.
Still eligible, even though of the 40 episodes I watched this year, only 3 aired in the year, but I don't care.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing Agatha All Along, a new TV show from Marvel. Following the events of WandaVision, Witch Agatha Harkness has lost her powers. When she meets a mysterious teen, who cannot say his name, they embark on a quest to assemble a coven of witches and then to walk the Witch's Road, a dangerous path that rewards those who completed it, and they hope to gain magical powers. We've seen this show on Disney+. Nick, what did you think of it?
I thought this show was extremely odd. I was very up for it going in. It has a sort of strong aesthetic, a good cast. The showrunner of WandaVision is back for it. And then it felt quite weird and awkward for the first half before I think finally finding itself a bit in the second half. And retrospectively, and this is going to be punishingly hard to talk about without spoilers. We're going to have to just give up eventually. But For now, I'm going to try it. Basically, there's a lot of reveals and things that retrospectively inform earlier events, which are unveiled over the course of the last 4 out of 9 episodes. And the result of this, unfortunately, and you can see how this is a sort of parallel series to WandaVision, in that WandaVision did something not dissimilar. But whereas WandaVision, I think, managed to nail it and managed to give you a sort of a sense of building tension and of, you know, something not quite right alongside this interesting show in the first few episodes, Agatha All Along, I think, slightly misses the mark, unfortunately, which leads to the first few episodes feeling a bit unmoored. You're being kept so at a distance from the motivation of especially the 2 main characters in order to set up reveals later. But you just sit there going, well, stuff certainly is happening, and it's kind of nicely shot and well acted, and it's kind of fun on a sort of moment-to-moment basis, but it's a bit rambling and I'm not quite sure I care. And then eventually, around episode 5, between episodes 5 and 6, they start revealing what's going on, and I thought the last 4 episodes were largely pretty good. In fact, pretty good, verging on very good at times. I really enjoyed them. It's just a shame, but for the first half of the series, they kind of kept us at arm's length in order to set that up, and those episodes didn't quite work, and maybe it should have been a shorter season to facilitate this. I don't know.
Yeah, I did feel that early on they had that thing that can be very annoying with writers, which is when you feel they're deliberately holding things back. I mean, you want there to be a sense of mystery. I mean, obviously, you know, if there's, a murder mystery, you want them to deliberately hold back who done it or whatever. Or if there's, a mysterious character, like a teen who can't say his name and no one knows who he is. But sometimes you get the sense that, like, the author or writer is just, creators, whatever, is deliberately just obscuring things just to create mystery and not revealing what's going on, which can be a slightly unsatisfactory experience. Yeah, I felt that this show did sort of have a bit of a slow stumble for a start. The first episode, which is basically a sort of true crime version of what they did with WandaVision and sitcoms in the previous season, although it was interesting and had a lot of mystery, it just ultimately didn't really go anywhere, in that it was just a 1 episode true crime thing that then sort of ended. And then the problem with that, it had the feeling of the second episode felt very much like the first episode, in that it's one when it introduced all the main characters, was set up, because even like Agatha Harkness, who's in the first episode, she's like playing a detective when she's not a detective, so even her has to be reintroduced in the second episode. They don't even get to the Witch's Road till like the beginning of the third episode, so it's a bit of a, there's a lot of introductions, there's not a lot of tension. Then it hits a really good run, probably episodes 5 to 8, as you were saying, and especially the climactic ones, episode 7, episode 8, very good, very tense, lots of twists, exciting stuff. But I did then feel that kind of it sort of fell to bits a bit in the final episode, was basically kind of pointless. I mean, I said the climactic episode 7 and 8 because it kind of finishes with episode 8, and then there's a sort of 9th episode denouement on the end, which I felt was unnecessary, but we could discuss that in more detail. But I was really into it in that 5 to 8 episode span.
So I quite liked the 9th episode, but as you say, clearly we will have to get into that later, as it's almost impossible to discuss without spoiling the entire show.
Yes, very much the case.
But I do agree that the first few episodes, they had this quest structure nailed onto them, and it does work retrospectively, and there's something, I don't know, it's one of these annoying things where you could look back on it and go, the generic quest structure is kind of the point. It's kind of meant to be a bit rote, maybe, but that doesn't make it less rote to watch. It's an annoying balance to pull off. Like, Again, you could see the link back to WandaVision when they were sort of pastiching genres in a way that was in some ways quite broad.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the execution just worked slightly better there. They did a slightly better job of doing these pastiches in a something slightly wrong way and slowly unfurling what it was. Whereas Agatha All Along, I think perhaps the main problem is because, or for whatever reason, because I guess they felt the reveal was different, they didn't really give you quite enough to let you fully guess what was going on. There were, I guess, things that retrospectively were hints, but I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was ever really possible to work it out, and it was just as a result quite strange, because especially as a result of this, you end up getting a show called Agatha All Along, which is nominally about Agatha Harkness, and yes, until the final episode, you don't really know what Agatha is doing at any given moment. That character seems kind of hanging around saying stuff.
Yeah.
Again, Catherine Hahn is very fun to watch, and a big reason why this is still kind of entertaining, even in the episodes that don't quite work, but yeah, it's an awkward choice.
Yeah, that's the thing, obviously, as you said, if you're kept a distance from the main character, it makes you hard to empathise with them. It seems to be like switching around who is the main character. Like, is it basically the teen or is it Agatha? It's one of those things when, like, the show's called Agatha All Along, it's kind of about Agatha, but at some points it feels like they're doing a sort of Moby Dick thing. You know, obviously, Captain Ahab is the main character in Moby Dick, but it's all seen from the perspective of Ishmael. Or, you know, yeah, again, this Sherlock Holmes story is written from the perspective of Dr. Watson. Is it one of those things when this character needs to be observed from the outside to be best understood? But the problem with this is sometimes you are just in the perspective of Agatha anyway, and also the teen character has mysteries that are kept from you as well, and sometimes you're seeing the teen from the outside when they're trying to solve the mystery of who his identity is, and you get lots of scenes with characters by themselves, Agatha or the team with other members of the Coven, kind of clearly plotting and discussing what's going on, but then some of those things don't relate to the kind of the meta, to the overall plot structure, because, I mean, this is hard to talk about spoilers, but like they're setting up things that don't happen or pay off or don't connect in. And also you get the feeling like, who am I supposed to be seeing this from the perspective of? Because if it's from the perspective of the teen, he's not in lots of scenes, but also you're kind of at a distance from Agatha. I mean, I feel there's something ambitious in this that could have worked, but like, it's one of those things, I like a sort of a thing like, again, like Sherlock Holmes, when it's the main character is not the point of view character. To be fair, for all the issues with it, the Stephen Moffat Sherlock show did kind of manage to capture the element of you're seeing Sherlock through Watson's eyes. But this show didn't quite like land that, because also it just wanted to drag you back to Agatha's perspective so much of the time.
Well, yeah, especially before it reveals who the teen is or what the deal with him is. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can backseat write it all we want, I guess. Would it have been better if they'd been upfront about who the teen is and maybe kept us a bit more at a distance from Agatha, thus making the big reveal at the end easier to pull off without having to have her just talk in riddles the whole time and have lots of alone moments with characters but never actually say what she thinks or really means, because that would reveal the truth. Like, there's the Aubrey Plaza character sort of drifts in and out again because she too has a secret which cannot be spoken till the end of the run. Which again just makes it all... Yeah, the fact that you've got these three main characters who have these dark secrets which they don't want to reveal does mean the few episodes before they reveal them are a bit sort of playing games. And they try to get around this by having these other characters who are a bit more straightforward, who do get to have little journeys in some of the earlier episodes. And some of that stuff works. Those characters are played by good actors. Obviously, one of the best bits is the Patti LuPone episode with the tarot reader, which is probably the best episode of the series, to be honest. The sort of out of sequence one in the tower. No,
I did enjoy that episode a lot. Yeah, I think some of the earlier ones before they revealed the twist, one of the issues with it is that they felt kind of similar in that, yeah, there were kind of two episodes that seemed they kind of did the same thing over it, which is they went to a place on the road, they walk into a house and there's like a test for one of the characters. First of all, they're testing the Jen character, the potions witch, and then there's the one dialing into the Alice character's backstory, which, you know, I mean, they're kind of like, I know, good sort of one-off episodes in that, yeah, it's kind of self-contained story. You know, if there's a challenge, the characters have to solve it. But I kind of felt the two were like very similar, and especially the second one when basically had to play this song that her mother's written and to overcome this curse. And it did feel like the emotional stakes weren't very high, because they just had to play the song, and then they played the song. The scene of them playing the song is quite good and quite fun to watch. But I just felt that like overall it's like there's not really like much emotional jeopardy here for this sort of supporting character. Which I guess what I'm trying to say with this is the show's always kind of entertaining and like sort of go, yeah, I'm not bored or whatever watching this. But the critic in me can't be silent saying like, yeah, but what is this achieving? What are what are the stakes here? Like what are, beyond the obvious, what is this driving towards? So, it's not unentertaining. We sat through some really like boring Marvel stuff like last year, like Secret Invasion, but I don't know, it's just not at the level say WandaVision was, which managed to take these little like self-contained dramas and like do something interesting with them, the way that like Life on Mars did, by having these kind of self-contained stories but always driving towards this like thing that's behind it, that's in the background, like this kind of big arc plot, whereas it just didn't quite come together in some of these early episodes.
Yeah, I think there wasn't quite enough there in the sort of self-contained stories they were doing to distract you from the fact that you were being kind of held back from a lot of the wider plot. I mean, this is definitely, I think, a cut above some of the more like generic Marvel shows which feel like they were just hacked out from the first draft. I think there's been a certain amount of effort put into this to create something that has a point and has twists and reveals and actually goes somewhere. Like, they kill some characters off and they don't just bring them back at the end. It does feel like things actually happen in this show, which is nice.
Yeah, there are stakes, things like that, and surprises along the way. And it doesn't feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is just a generic superhero-y spy thing. There's some terrorists, and they're going to set off a bomb or whatever. I can't even remember the plot. It was rubbish. But the villains were called Flag Smashers in the sort of least subtle thing ever. But we're not here to review that. So I always felt this was, it was always trying to do something interesting or like as you said, there's some thought being into it, and it seems to have, in that sense, always trying to do something clever. And then when it kind of got to the point of it could kind of paying off some of its mysteries, it did become very exciting and engaging.
Yes, as we say, I do think the last few episodes were good. We should probably drop a spoiler ball soon so we can argue about the last episode, it seems. But yes, I do think that it's probably somewhere in the mid-table of the Marvel shows, maybe upper mid-table, just for me, just because I do appreciate a show that's actually trying to do something, even if I have to admit it didn't quite nail it.
I can get behind upper mid-table, especially for the stronger episodes like the tarot reading Falling Knives episode.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is your spoiler wall, I guess.
Yeah.
Run
Spoilers. Spoilers if you care. There are some twists at the end of this show which do recontextualise the entire thing, and we're going to spoil them. Last chance. Dum-de-dum.
Right.
There you are.
Yeah, so take us away.
Fine. So in the last episode of this show, well, there's a couple, obviously. In the middle of the series, they reveal that the anonymous teen character is actually Wanda Maximoff's son, which certainly everyone on the comics internet had guessed, because the kid they've cast, who's one of the main guys from Heartstopper, does look exactly like that character in the comics to an uncanny degree. So no one was really surprised in my corner of the internet when that character turned out to be that character, but it was nonetheless a good reveal in that it, made the character's motivation come into focus and pushed the story forward. It kind of feels like they could have revealed it earlier, to be honest, but that bit worked.
Yep. No, that was good. And also, obviously, crucially links it back to the previous show, WandaVision, and sort of firmly cements this as a kind of sequel to WandaVision. It's sort of WandaVision Season 2, but doing its own thing and stuff, which I appreciated, the fact that this is both a sequel and a story in its own sense. Looped that back, obviously, gave that character something more substantial, filled in his backstory. Even, I liked the episode explaining his backstory. I'm generally, and I'm on the record on this podcast, for not being a fan of episodes in seasons when they pause the plot to kind of go back and fill in a lot of stuff that you probably knew anyway. But in this case, we didn't know a lot of it because it had been kept from us. But that still worked and created some drama, looped the whole thing together nicely. That was a good twist, and it kind of propelled things forwards, certainly into that crucial sort of 7-8 episode bit when we kind of everything comes together. That sense of Billy's character, the teen now revealed to be Billy, and Agatha end up working together to overcome the final big challenges, such as the falling knives, and then the final episode when they confront the other big twist, or one of the other big twists, which is Audrey Plaza, who we haven't actually discussed so far, and is very, very good in this, as she's good in everything. Playing one of the other witches is revealed to be Death in a pretty good twist. Obviously, Audrey Plaza does Death incredibly well, camping it up as the epitome of destruction. And there's a good final confrontation there, which, all that worked well.
Yeah, I think Aubrey Plaza, as you say, is very well cast as the Grim Reaper herself. And the final showdown, the Marvel-esque big special effecty fighty fight, is in episode 8 rather than the episode 9, which is the last one, and is, I think, kept to a nice, concise length and doesn't feel like it just massively changes the tone of the whole show. It's almost as if they've been listening to the feedback they got from WandaVision, where everyone complained that the big final Marvel confrontation was ridiculous and didn't fit in with the rest of the show at all. So here it does more or less work. It does seem like an apt final confrontation for that show. They still get to do the inevitable bit where one of the characters gets a shiny new superhero costume, and it doesn't feel too out of place. Yeah, no, that stuff was good. Aubrey Plaza's death is good. She's high profile, and death is, a bit of a broad concept, so maybe she'll be back in other things. It would, you'd think, be quite easy to sort that out.
Yeah, she's very, very good in, like I say, in almost everything, and she does evil well. I assume the costume that Billy's wearing is his costume from the comics?
Yes, that's his comics accurate Young Avengers superhero costume, yes.
Yeah.
And again, you hope they'd use him again. He is very good in this. Joe Locke, who we haven't really mentioned, playing Billy Maximoff, or Wiccan as he's known in the comics but not called here. He's very good in this. He's good in Heartstopper as well. He's got a lot of presence. He has to go up with Catherine Hahn and Aubrey Plaza for a lot of the time, and he equates himself pretty well. So yeah, I'd be up for seeing him again.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. Yeah, those are some big personalities and very talented performers. Yeah, no, I thought he was very good in this as well. Again, playing one of the kind of, smaller, more contained characters, in that his performance is smaller, more contained. I guess you've got some big performers already mentioned, so he provides a good counterbalance to that. And sometimes it's hard to be the smaller, quieter performance opposite some big people, especially in a superhero show, but he nails that very, very well. And and the final bit was, again, crucially, it worked well because it was tied to the character development. Some characters had to overcome some emotional obstacles and make some emotional sacrifices, as well as doing some stuff with superpowers. And when those things are looped together, it does resonate more. And that's what Marvel gets at its best. It does the whole thing of linking character journey in with extra personal conflict, super powered conflict. That's when things work really well. Obviously, that's why possibly one of the best ones is Captain America Winter Soldier, because you've got that personal relationship between Bucky and Cap, as well as the superhero supervillain dynamic. Similar to other things like including Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi one, or Spider-Man Homecoming, etc., etc., etc. So that worked well, and also it crucially got away from the trap that these things could fall into, which is in a superpowered fight, it's just people making constipated faces at each other until one of them goes like, "No, you're too powerful," and then it ends.
Yes, it does avoid the swirling maelstrom of special effects. Yes, it is a tangible final confrontation. It feels in keeping with the sort of witchy, wiccany, campy, spooky tone they've been going for. No, it's good stuff. And and again, since we're in the spoiler section, obviously they actually kill Agatha, which is, a decent ending to the Agatha All Along show.
Yes, and I did like the fact that they didn't walk that back in the final episode, which I was 100% expecting them to do. So that was just a nice and interesting surprise twist. Although she does reappear as a ghost.
She is present, but I'll give them that. It's a ghosty, spooky show. They can have it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. They didn't. I assume they were going to end up with something like using magic, and you got to remember this is a show about magic, so almost technically anything can happen. They'd use some magic to reconstitute her body or something like that, but they didn't go there, at least. So that was a big final change.
Yes, and then we get to the last episode where it is, there's a lot of backstory stuff for Agatha. We finally get a bit of a handle on her motivation, and it is revealed that basically the whole Witch's Road thing was a con. It never existed at all until Billy Maximoff came along and summoned it into existence. But before that, it was just a trick Agatha was using to lure witches in and kill them, which I thought was quite a nice, clever reveal, which I didn't see coming at all. And I thought it cleverly recontextualised the show. It still didn't make the boring episodes not boring, but it did, I think, work in itself.
I liked it as a twist, and I didn't see it coming, and I thought it was a good twist and interesting. And as you said, it recontextualised what came before, which is important for a good final act twist. I felt that the tension and drama just kind of went out of the show after the final confrontation, which we just discussed, and that the last episode didn't have much tension in it, which was a problem, and it was just kind of wrapping up some loose ends. I mean, the early bit of the episode when it reveals about one of the many mysteries is what happened to Agatha's son. That's sort of revealed early on in the episode. I kind of really felt that should have come earlier in the show to added some more detail to Agatha's motivation, might have made her an easier character to engage with had that piece of information been earlier, not come say right at the beginning, but that could have been a good thing to reveal a third of the way in when sort of the stakes are rising and things are being revealed. Saving it to the end meant it felt like, oh, that explains that, but would have preferred to have known that beforehand. And there was just kind of it just felt very like tying up some loose ends, setting up where the story's going next if they do another season or when these characters reappear in some other Marvel property. And I just felt that, after the kind of very tense episode 7, episode 8, that this one sort of, was a bit anticlimactic.
I mean, at the end of the day, it was an epilogue. It just was. The episode 8 was the big climax. This was an epilogue. You could probably make a coherent argument that they could have just made it another 15 minutes on the end of the previous episode rather than making a whole other episode.
Yeah, which is, I think, would be good. Considering they dropped the final 2 episodes on the same day, I'd have been more happy with one epic length. Well, not obviously double length, but at least one longer final episode released on the same day. Partly because the fact this is another episode means that there's a sort of deflating tension which comes at the end of each episode. The big emotional and special effects filled finale would have given this coda enough momentum to be, like, as you say, 15 minutes on the end of episode 8. But the problem is, because it's an episode in its own right, there's a break, the tension goes away, you go through that big emotional thing, but when we watch these back to back, but there's still a pause where, make a cup of tea, go to the toilet or whatever, check social media for a minute before you go into watching the final episode. And that break meant that the momentum felt very much had gone out of it. It would have worked better as one finale.
It still mostly works for me. I do broadly agree that this whole show could have done with being less episodes, and I think the whole structure of it ended up feeling a bit stretched out. I don't know whether they could have done it as a one-off Agatha Harkness Halloween special. That might have been a bit too compressed, but I think it could probably have lost 3, maybe 4 episodes from the runtime without losing that much.
Yeah. I guess that's a similar thing. Yeah, that's why I felt if they could cut down some of the build-up stuff earlier on that was sort of slowing it down, that would have created space to move some of the bits from this final episode further back. But then again, we're not supposed to be rewriting this over the shoulders, but I do feel it would have been good to the sort of medieval era or early modern period, technically, flashback stuff would have, I think, helped be engaged more with the character had it come earlier on. The other thing to say about the final episode, and this is, I guess, a little bit Marvel criminology, which has come from reading around the finale online, is that apparently the last episode went through some major rewrites in order to remove Kang, aka Jonathan Majors, from it, which might be a result of why it kind of lacked tension in that they took out a major villain, which I guess would have added some tension to it.
I tried not to over-engage with that stuff. I mean, I'll say this, it still felt coherent. It still felt like an ending to the story it was telling. Like, to be honest, even if the whole Jonathan Majors thing hadn't happened, and we were still just doing that in good faith, I would have still felt a bit, oh, come on, if Kang had turned up at the end of this. I liked the fact that it just felt like an ending to the story they were telling.
Yes, and I also like the fact that the whole thing was a self-contained story in its own right. A big reveal that actually the road had been created by Kang or something like that in the final episode would have actually, undermined everything that we'd just seen before. So maybe it's for the best that it worked out this way, at least from a storytelling perspective.
I mean, I can't imagine they were ever going to do that, would they? I mean,
no, probably not.
If you don't have the reveal that the road was a con by Agatha, then the whole story doesn't make sense,
Yeah, again, I'm not trying to rewrite this over the author's shoulder, but I did like the twist that it was Billy that made it real, as you said. I think that was a good twist that I liked as well. And I did like the reveal, and this is one of my favourite twists a lot of things do, and I was about to say my favourite instance of it, but actually it would blow a twist for a film that I'm pretty sure Nick's not seen, which I might want to watch at some point in the recommendation episode. So I'm going to back away from that by saying I did like the bit when he goes around the room and realises all the elements of the road came from things from his bedroom, and which is all being cleverly set up in the flashback episode when we see his life before he meets Agatha. All the little things, are like there, and that's a kind of, you can see how it's pieced together. I do like those twists when it's like, see, we laid all the little elements of this before and you didn't notice, but it was all significant. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, I thought it was coherent. I thought it was a good final shuffling of the cards, and it worked for me as a little epilogue. I didn't mind the structure of it, but it could probably have worked as well as a shorter epilogue. Yeah,
I'm not trying to say it ruined my enjoyment of the show or I hated it or anything that strong. I just feel with my critic hat on, I just felt maybe this didn't work, especially in contrast to the very, very good episode 7, episode 8, which I enjoyed very much. But also, and I think I said the same thing about WandaVision, one thing I would like to highlight here is that I like the fact that this show really seemed like it was trying to do something. It had ambition, it was trying to be bold, it was trying to be creative. And I feel that shows that, or films or books or really anything that try to do something groundbreaking and try to, really pull something off should be rewarded, especially if you can maybe point holes and saying oh, that didn't quite work or that didn't work, but having ambition and trying things that are ambitious that don't work is better than just doing safe, relatively boring standard superhero or spying plot lines. I think it's the metaphor I've used before that in gymnastics at the Olympics and things like that, if you perfectly perform a relatively safe and unambitious, technically routine, then you score mid to high table. To break into the 9s and 10s, you have to attempt complex stuff, and complex stuff not perfectly executed is higher rewarded than simple stuff flawlessly executed, and I feel that very much applies here.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely one of the more interesting Marvel shows. If you're marking these on, I don't know, aspiration alone, then this would probably be one of the best ones. They're definitely trying a lot here, and I appreciated it, and I enjoyed watching it. It's an interesting show to watch. Not quite an interesting failure. I feel it's harsh calling it a failure, but
absolutely not a failure.
But yes, it's definitely interesting. It maybe doesn't entirely work all the way through, but I enjoyed it a lot, and I like the fact that it was allowed to end. I mean, yes, it sort of pushes a couple of the characters off to do other things, and maybe they'll turn up again one day, but this is self-contained and straightforward in a way a lot of Marvel stuff sometimes isn't, and I appreciated that as well.
Nothing Marvel seems to ever truly end, in the sense that even Robert Downey Jr. is coming back after being given a definitive ending. But yeah, I did like that this was clearly conceived and executed as a single story. And, as we said, some degree a sequel to WandaVision, but you can watch this in its own right without watching WandaVision. And it's a loose sequel in the sense that they are kind of separate but related stories, which is something you get a lot more in books. I feel it's a sequel, but only in a sort of loose sense. It doesn't seem to happen so much in film and television, I guess, because it's this drive for a sort of strong, continuous narrative. But I did like this, and I thought it was very interesting. I like the gothy, witchy vibe, which Nick mentioned at the top of the review. I wanted to echo that. I thought it looked beautiful and was cool and gothy and scary and appropriate for Halloween. So yeah, generally lots of good stuff.
Yeah, no, decent show. It's an annoyingly easy one to nitpick, but I do think we should stress the fact that it is actually broadly quite good and interesting and fun.
Yes, and yeah, that goes back to us saying that, I think it should be rewarded for trying interesting things, even though when you try interesting things, inevitably people like us with our critic hats on will nitpick. But yeah, the overall point is they should be rewarded for ambition, which I very much enjoyed about this show, that aspect of it. Finally, this episode we will be discussing Venom, The Last Dance, the third film in the Venom trilogy, starring Tom Hardy as the alien parasite Spider-Man villain. Eddie and Venom are on the run, wanted for the murder that Carnage committed in the last film, and also hunted by the army who want to control the symbiotes. To make matters worse, a dangerous alien has come through from another dimension to capture the Codex that Venom has, which will release the evil creator of the symbiotes from his prison. We saw this film in the cinema recently. Nick, what did you think of it?
Well, we famously were surprisingly taken by the last Venom film, which seems to dispense with some of the more generic, dull action of the first one and just make mostly a slightly weird comedy with vague rom-com overtures about Tom Hardy and his gooey friend, including a weird scene where Venom went clubbing with Little Sims. Yeah, very odd film, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and this, unfortunately, does not quite live up to it. It does still contain a lot of weird Tom Hardy moments and silly exchanges with Venom, and there's a few fun little bits, like the moment where they venomize a horse, as seen in the trailer. And that sort of thing is welcome, but unfortunately it does bring back a bit more of the slightly boring generic action movie plot shit from the first one, including a dull villain and lots of needless scenes involving scientists sitting around poking symbiotes. If you like the Tom Hardy dicking around, you'll still get your regular dose of it, but the combination of dull, slightly generic action movie plotting and sudden introduction of franchise shit and slightly unconvincing it's the end melodrama kind of gets in the way of the fun, sadly.
Yeah, I felt that Tom Hardy's charisma and his performance kind of carried this through into the entertaining camp. And sort of, yeah, I guess I use camp in every sense of the word, in that it is quite silly and camp, and also into the area of being good. I don't know, that sentence got away from me. But yeah, Tom Hardy, good in this. Yeah, he's always good in this sort of thing. He's a talented actor and can, perform very well. And he's got charisma. The back and forth, as you say, is very, very good. And they've successfully homed in on that as the thing that the fans want and enjoy. I kind of felt with this film, there's some good scenes, all these entertaining scenes that are sort of just tangentially linked together. The plot doesn't hugely hold together. I mean, there's the very simple plot, which I quite like, which is that Venom has the Codex, evil aliens are coming to kill him and take the Codex. Thus leads to chases and fights and things like that. That is good, and that works on that level. That's kind of what you want from your sort of popcorn blockbuster film. But there's additional stuff going on with soldiers as well, thrown in again as bits of soldiers, poking symbiotes. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I'm not really sure how that connects into the main thing, so it kind of felt like a bit strung together.
Yeah, a lot of character motivation stuff with a specific alien poking scientist played by Juno Temple, who is good and is always a welcome presence in things. But the sudden introduction of a load of extra characterization from her. Even having seen the whole film, I'm not entirely sure what they were doing. It feels vaguely like they were taking a sort of half-hearted punt at setting up a spin-off, but I'm really not sure.
Yeah. I don't really know how it connects into the main plot line, which the thing is, on paper, or what I described at the top of the review, it's beautifully simple. It didn't need complicating. What we want from Venom is just create some kind of chase film, something like that. That would have worked well. I mean, we like the last one because it's just, you've got Venom, and there's the bigger, nastier, evil version of Venom. They fight. Job's a good one.
I think having that film did benefit a bit from having Woody Harrelson as the villain. I mean, Carnage is the only good Venom villain. Once you get rid of Carnage, you're just left with a lot of generic soldiers who want the alien, or other alien creatures who want to fight the alien.
Yeah.
Neither of which are as fun as Carnage.
No.
It's hard to create another, suitable alien symbiote villain that isn't just, spare Carnage or spare Venom.
Yeah, and I did like the fact in this one that they didn't have another symbiote villain, which in the first one they had Riot, and the second one they had Carnage. I kind of thought, when there was a scene when they had all the different symbiotes in one room, we thought, well, they're all going to combine into hybrid, which I believe is something from the comics.
It is, well done.
Yeah. I believe that's me repurposing your knowledge as my knowledge on the podcast.
I'm sure I probably have mentioned that in the pub at some point, to one of our deeply interesting pub conversations about all the different symbiotes in shit 90s Spider-Man comics. Anyway.
In the different colours, yeah. But they did avoid that, which was good. But obviously, instead of having a symbiote villain, they just had a generic evil sorcerer villain who sat on a throne and just said evil things.
Yeah, it's weird, because on the one hand, they are leaning quite hard into, it's the last dance, it's the final film, it's the end of the trilogy, this is it, it's going to end, it's all going to come to an end. Into a bit in the marketing and a bit in the film as well, especially as it gets towards the end. On the other, the villain they've chosen to use doesn't actually leave his chair on the entire film, and is basically there entirely to tease his presence in hypothetical future films of an uncertain nature. The thing Venom actually fights in this film is a sort of hench monster that the big chair villain sends after him. I find that quite a confusing mismatch of stakes for a final film. If this is the final film, why isn't he fighting the big final boss? Is the big final boss of Venom going to come back in a later film and fight Juno Temple?
Yeah, that's a bizarre series of decisions that led up to that. And also, it really cannot be stressed how little characterization there is for the monster that's chasing them. It is just a monster, like it's a weapon. It runs after the villain. It's got less personality than the Terminator.
I think it's a thing from a specific Venom miniseries, or at least the character design is. But that character basically was just a predator that eats alien symbiotes, which honestly would have been an easier and more simple motivation for them to use, but they've done this codex stuff instead, so they can work null into it.
Yeah, again, the simplicity I felt is what they should have lent into, because, adding more detail to the world of the symbiotes is probably not what we needed in the final film. We just needed some kind of confrontation is what was needed. So, it's just kind of reach this thing when, although the scenes are entertaining, and, it's one of those things I was kind of, laughing along to the various jokes, like the bit when Tom Hardy just wearily turns to camera and goes, oh, can't feel my balls. See, that's funny. I enjoyed that. Probably more than I really should have, or admit on this podcast. But again, with my critic hat on, I just was sat in the cinema feeling like this is just an interesting list of funny, witty, and occasionally exciting scenes that are kind of tangentially strung together by a plot that doesn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, the plot, I don't know. The thing is, the Carnage plot was also, let's be honest, kind of balls. Enough to mention balls again. But nothing much really happened in the Carnage plot. But, I don't know, they didn't spend that much time on it, and it at least had some entertaining camp from Woody Harrelson. Whereas the villains here are, as you say, either quite dry soldier performances or quite nothingy alien henchman performances. And as a result, even more so than usual with these films, whether this film is good basically depends on whether Tom Hardy is on screen. The bits when Tom Hardy is off screen are quite dull, and unfortunately there's more of them than you'd like. Yeah,
and also it's one of those things when the more you think about it, the less it worked because of the plot flaws and things like that. I mean, there are some scenes that seem kind of largely superfluous, but the fact that they have Tom Hardy in them means they're fun and interesting to watch. There's a whole detour when they go to Vegas, which doesn't really add anything to the plot, but it is funny to watch Venom playing the slots and things like that, and then running into the convenience store owner from the first film, which is at least, it's funny and entertaining because Tom Hardy is on screen. I mean, it could have quite been clearly excised from the film and wouldn't have made much of a difference.
Yeah, the ludicrous sequence where Venom decides to basically accept getting caught by the evil predator so he can have a dance with the convenience store owner, which does not really stand up to Cinema Sins analysis, I suspect, but was incredibly funny and silly.
Yeah, and again it comes back to the fact that you're enjoying this film when Tom Hardy is on the screen doing his double act with his evil symbiote version of himself. So that was good, even though it's again, when you think about it later, it's what did that scene add to the film other than humour and, mirth?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, that scene where the Venom had his sort of final dance with the convenience store owner, Mrs. Chen, was one of the only bits that made me feel a vague sense of pathos, to be honest. But, yeah.
There is that, yeah.
I mean, there's a few stabs at pathos, this being the final one in the trilogy, question mark. Or at least the last one Tom Hardy wants to do for now.
Yeah.
Whether they're going to do a spin-off with, I don't know, Spider-Man or Juno Temple or both of them to fight Null, or whether they're just going to put Null on ice until Tom Hardy feels like having another go, I don't know.
Yeah, who knows, or if it's going to relate to this other ongoing series of Spider-Man villain films, including Madam Web, which came out earlier this year, obviously much trashed, and Kraven the Hunter, which has been released in a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, they have notably not threatened to make any more after Kraven the Hunter. This is it for now in terms of the Sony universe of overextended Spider-Man villains. So, yeah, maybe they've finally decided that this is largely stupid, and now that they've lost Tom Hardy, there's no reason to carry on.
Yeah.
Maybe not. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. I mean, the guy playing Kraven, is it Aaron Taylor Johnson? Isn't there now a rumour that he might be James Bond, which I guess might ruin their plan to turn him into another keystone of their Spider-Man empire?
Yeah, he is one of the names that's frequently mentioned in the breath of being the next Bond. And yeah, that'd be good casting. But I'm sure if Kraven makes $1 billion, there'll be a sequel, but we'll see if that happens or not. Odds aren't great at this moment. You know, in terms of what we're talking about, the finality of this, I did feel that they brought enough emotion for the final goodbye scene, in that I felt that, like, you know, that kind of, you know, brought the chops for the moment it's needed. In the cinema, I felt convinced of, like, you know, we've been through these characters through 3 films, you know, their ups and downs, their silliness. They've kind of successfully established the kind of buddy cop, the straight one and the silly one, and, like, you know, they've got a good dynamic. It's kind of weird when you think it's just Tom Hardy and Tom Hardy, but you know, you've been on a journey with these characters, and when they come to the inevitable goodbye, you know, again, spoilers for the film called The Last Dance, but I felt that it did deliver the emotional in that moment, partly because Tom Hardy's good at acting, and it was just serious enough, so that I actually felt that, okay, yeah, you kind of earned your nice little, like, emotional farewell at that moment.
Well, yeah, and as you say, Tom Hardy is good enough at actually serious acting as well as dicking around talking about his balls that he can put off the sad farewell to the blob of CGI goo voiced by him in a way that makes you vaguely feel something, even if you do also think that the film leading up to it was largely gibberish.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly with that. But yeah, I guess I was invested in that moment. I felt myself generally invested in that farewell, even though the setup with the giant vat of acid was some of the most obvious setup ever. Yeah, my partner described it as Chekhov's acid vat. I feel that the great work of the phenomenal playwright Anton Chekhov and short story writer has somewhat been tarnished by just this one concept that he's now well known for. So I feel reluctant bringing it up. But yeah, that was some fairly obvious setup. But it did at least pay off in the end.
Well, yeah, that's the only thing it was there to do. Well, yeah, and you had an enjoyable random sequel to V. Siphons, which...
Yeah...
I mean, whatever. There was some dumb comedy and I found it kind of funny, and I guess that's all you can really ask for. It's hard to describe why it was there or what it added, but I laughed at the bit where he was stuck in the van listening to them sing, and isn't that the main thing we get from this?
Yeah, that scene was funny, of them having a sing-along with Venom to Major Tom, the Bowie song, wasn't it? Yeah.
Space Odyssey.
Space Odyssey, yeah, sorry. It's I always call it Major Tom, which I know is not the name. But yeah, that was just, like, silly and, you know, kind of funny. But then, like, they had a bit when, like, in the big battle at the end, when the soldiers are fighting the alien monster things, the family is just randomly in there, like, just so they can get in the way. I guess they're there to add more jeopardy, and so there's some characters you care about who feel threatened and can be saved by Venom, including a quite cute kid and a surly teenager. Yeah, well, we're just leading into all the stereotypes. But yeah, it did one of those things where you're just like, come on, this is just ridiculous. This is the kind of, like, silly 90s movie level stuff of, like, why is there just a random family in the middle of this battle just so they can be saved by Venom, and to raise this emotional stakes somewhat.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah. I guess this continues Rhys Ifans' bizarre turns in Spider-Man or Spider-Man adjacent films.
Yeah, it's odd. As you say, it does feel a bit like a 90s action film. I mean, the whole thing feels a bit like an action film from about 20 or 30 years ago, to be honest, which is on some level weirdly charming, but also means it feels quite thin and garbled.
It does have those retro vibes to it. I guess the problem is, like, a lot of those 90s films had, like, this sort of simplicity at their core. You know, yeah, they just really nailed their concepts and were kind of, like, tight. At least the ones we remember are, obviously, the bad ones just been forgotten. But, you know, even something like, I don't know, like Small Soldiers, I know it's more of a kid's film and things like that. But, yeah, it is quite efficient and tight in how it how it's delivered and how it just sort of drives onwards and stuff. Whereas this has kind of unnecessary additional plot elements, such as like, you know, bits of scientists poking symbiotes that aren't really needed and stuff. I guess because they're picking up plot lines from the comics or doing things they feel comics fans want, maybe that's why it's got this extra stuff in. Obviously it's got some bits in it that are there to relate or set up other films, like the stuff with Null, although to be fair, this film does less groan under the weight of in-universe continuity than some superhero films we've seen.
Well, they don't actually mention Null that much. He doesn't really do anything. This
is one of the issues. Yeah.
It's weird. He's both there enough to make the film not feel like it has a real ending, but not enough to actually affect things that much. I mean, he's played by Andy Serkis, which is certainly some information. He doesn't really get to do much.
Yeah, that was also slightly bizarre because you can barely see him in this. It's just so dark, like literally. Yeah, I guess it doesn't have that kind of glorious efficiency that some of those 90s action movies had. Things like that. It's kind of just a bit, I don't know, flabby and stuff in places. And although, yeah, again, there's always some fun scenes, partly because of Tom Hardy. Overall, you're less feeling it could be better.
Yeah, and plus, you know, it may be flabby, but it's all over in a tight 95 minutes. So
that is true.
Can't complain about the length anyway, for once.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, yeah, I feel it's part of the whole thing. They have successfully zoomed in on what people like about these films: short, tight, bits of humour. Tom Hardy does a comedy double act with himself. All that good stuff, which again was in the previous films, is still here to like. Good soundtrack, drop a few good needle drops. So yeah, in that sense, it's got some good stuff.
I don't know. I still feel like they've kind of stuck to the classic 2000s superhero trilogy structure. First one sort of shaky, second one perfected the formula, third one kind of overworked the formula and made it slightly less fun. But never mind. Okay, and that was Anti-Hero Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you very much as ever for listening. If you have enjoyed this, why not go to our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com and enjoy the vast range of old episodes about heroes, anti-heroes, and all the other things that exist, plus various articles by Alistair mostly. And if you like all that, then please leave us a nice 5-star review. Thank you.
You can also find more of us on social media. You can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence, or where we're most active is Twitter and Blue Sky. You can find us there by searching for MFV Podcast. You can also find more from me, again, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram by searching for Alistair Ball. You can get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, and you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com.
And you can find more from me at nickbryan.com or Nick Bryan on Blue Sky, nickbryan.com on Instagram, nickmb on Twitter. Probably better to just search my name, to be honest. And yes, you can find out more about my self-published comic, including Sold, which will have finished by the time this is released, but you should better buy it on my online shop pretty soon. And yep, we will see you back here in a couple of weeks for the next episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, in which we'll be covering yet more comic book villain anti-hero action with the Penguin, and then we will be delving, a little bit late for Halloween, but still into the realms of horror with Heretic. See you then for that. Bye-bye.
Bye.